Welcome to Chasing Curiosity TV. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. Breaking news tonight from the South China Sea, where long-simmering tensions have erupted into crisis. Chinese warships collided while chasing a Philippine vessel, prompting a U.S. destroyer to intervene. What began as a routine patrol has escalated into an international standoff, with global headlines warning of catastrophe. At the disputed Scarborough Shoal, the turquoise waters churned with military vessels. On one side, the small but defiant BRP Gabriela Silang. On the other, a swarm of imposing Chinese ships. For hours, a dangerous game of cat and mouse unfolded, with the Chinese attempting to block the Filipinos, who refused to back down. This was no accident. It was a calculated move in a bitter sovereignty dispute. The Scarborough Shoal, seized by China in 2012, has long been a flashpoint, with Filipino fishermen harassed and denied access. Under new leadership, the Philippines decided to challenge the status quo, fully aware of the risks. Journalists on board the Gabriela Silang documented every tense moment, determined to show the world the reality of Beijing's tactics. The air was electric with tension, the sense of impending disaster unmistakable. Cameras captured sharp commands and frantic radio chatter, ensuring the world would witness whatever happened next. The world's eyes were on these remote waters, as the stage was set for tragedy. The crisis was about to explode. The Philippine plan was bold, used the nimble BRP Gabriela Silang as bait to draw out the Chinese fleet. The ship sailed directly toward the shoal, asserting its right to patrol its own waters, as affirmed by a 2016 international tribunal. Filipino commanders anticipated China's aggressive response, counting on their overconfidence and rigid command structure. The Gabriela Silang's captain executed daring maneuvers, outsmarting the larger Chinese ships and exposing their recklessness, all broadcast live. Calm and professional, the Filipino crew contrasted sharply with their agitated pursuers. This was more than naval tactics. It was a performance for a global audience. Journalists equipped with advanced satellite tech streamed the confrontation in real time, framing the Philippines as defenders of international law. The world watched as a small nation stood up to a giant, shifting the narrative from aggression to defense. The Chinese, frustrated and humiliated on live TV, took greater risks under pressure from Beijing. Their standard intimidation tactics failed against the skilled Filipino captain. The mounting tension pushed the situation toward disaster. The bait had been taken. The trap was set. The crisis spiraled out of control. The breaking point came fast and violently. In a frantic attempt to block the Gabriela Silang, two Chinese Coast Guard ships collided. One misjudged its speed, slamming into its sister ship. The impact was catastrophic. The smaller vessel's hull was breached, water flooding in as panic erupted on deck. Crew members scrambled for life rafts or leapt into the sea, while the other ship, heavily damaged, remained stunned and slow to respond. Cameras on the Gabriela Silang captured the chaos, shattering the image of Chinese naval discipline. At least a dozen Chinese crew were lost, either trapped or swept away. The Filipino vessel immediately broadcast distress calls and offered assistance, displaying professionalism and humanity. The Chinese fleet, paralyzed by rigid command, failed to mount a coordinated rescue. Confusion reigned, with ships moving erratically and radio channels filled with panic. The tragedy exposed a fatal flaw in China's military machine. In crisis, the Dragon was slow and ineffective. The world saw not power, but disarray. The consequences were immediate and global. As chaos peaked, a new force arrived. The USS John S. McCain, an American destroyer, appeared on the horizon. Its presence was no accident, but a pre-planned signal from Washington and Manila. The McCain moved calmly, announcing its intent to provide humanitarian aid and ensure safety at sea. Launching a Seahawk helicopter, the U.S. Navy aided in the search for missing Chinese crew, demonstrating de-escalation and professionalism. The message to Beijing was clear. The U.S. stands with its allies and upholds international norms. Shock rippled through the Chinese command. Their aggression was neutralized as they retreated and widened their perimeter. The McCain's arrival froze the situation, preventing further escalation or attempts to seize evidence. This was a new American strategy. Forward presence, not just words. The U.S.-Philippines alliance was proven real, backed by naval power. The world saw a living commitment, not just a treaty on paper. The cavalry had arrived, checkmating Beijing in its own backyard. The crisis was contained, but the message was unmistakable. The balance of power had shifted. The live footage from the Gabriela Silang was a global media bombshell. News networks worldwide cut to the high-definition feed, showing daring maneuvers, the collision and the U.S. destroyer's arrival. The story unfolded in real time, bypassing propaganda and exposing the truth. The world saw Chinese recklessness and Filipino professionalism, with the US acting as a stabilizing force. Journalists on board provided crucial context, interviewing the Filipino captain and capturing chaotic Chinese radio transmissions. The human element, faces of determination, shock, and compassion, made the crisis relatable. Beijing's attempts to spin the story were dismantled by irrefutable video evidence. Social media exploded with citizen investigators analyzing every frame. The narrative was set before China could respond. The court of global opinion had already delivered its verdict. The truth was undeniable and devastating for Beijing. Behind closed doors in Beijing, the Chinese leadership was paralyzed. Years of power consolidation by Xi Jinping had created a command structure afraid to act without direct orders. When the collision occurred, local commanders froze, waiting for guidance that never came in time. Reports were softened as they moved up the chain, delaying the truth from reaching the top. By the time Xi learned the full story, the global narrative was already set by live footage. China's propaganda machine was powerless against the real-time media firestorm. Recent purges in the military had left only loyalists, not necessarily the most competent leaders. Distrust and instability plagued the senior ranks. The chaos at sea mirrored the chaos at the top. The world saw a superpower exposed by its own system. The Philippines' response was a masterclass in lawfare and media strategy. Citing the 2016 Hague ruling, they framed every action as enforcement of international law, giving their stance global legitimacy. The Foreign Secretary held up the Tribunal Award and calmly explained the legality of their patrol, contrasting it with China's violations. The live stream bypassed censorship, presenting raw evidence directly to the world. This assertive transparency prevented Beijing from denying or deflecting. The combination of legal authority and undeniable video was a knockout blow. The US amplified the message, reaffirming the tribunal ruling and condemning China's behavior. Diplomats worldwide echoed this stance, trapping China in a strategic bind. Denial was impossible. Admission meant explaining illegal actions. Outmaneuvered by lawyers, journalists, and diplomats, China was left reeling. The Philippines had set a new standard for asymmetric power. The US response at Scarborough Shoal marked a new era in strategy. Past administrations focused on diplomacy or economic pressure, but often lacked military resolve. The Trump era shifted to direct confrontation, identifying China as the primary competitor. The current doctrine, integrated deterrence, combines military, diplomatic, economic, and informational power. The Scarborough incident was a textbook case. The Philippines provided legitimacy and media firepower, the US supplied military and diplomatic muscle. The USS McCain's deployment was a coordinated move, not unilateral gunboat diplomacy. China could no longer intimidate neighbors one-on-one. US support was immediate and integrated. The stakes for Beijing rose dramatically. The map of risk in the South China Sea had been redrawn. The era of passive pivots was over. Active pressure had arrived. The Scarborough Shoal crisis has fundamentally shifted the Indo-Pacific balance of power. China's aura of invincibility was shattered, exposing deep vulnerabilities in its military and leadership. Southeast Asian nations, inspired by the Philippines' strategy, now see a new way to resist Chinese pressure, through law, transparency, and alliances. ASEAN may find renewed unity, while China's global image suffers lasting damage. The live footage countered years of propaganda, making it harder for Beijing to win friends abroad. Europe and others are now more skeptical of China's intentions. The crisis will be remembered as a turning point. A small nation exposed a superpower's weakness, and the US demonstrated a new way to support allies. The struggle for a free and open Indo-Pacific continues, but momentum has shifted. The waters remain dangerous, but the strategic tide is turning. The world has seen the truth, live, and unfiltered. The future of the South China Sea is no longer certain.